improvement, found this awesome. I started again, so just so we have it for posterity. So yeah, so who I am, my name is Leigh Griffin. I am based out of Waterford in Ireland. And I work for a company called Red Hat. And in Red Hat, I'm a software engineer and manager. So by way of background, I was a software engineer that wandered into process improvement, found this Scrum thing and really enjoyed it, right? And started looking further into what Scrum is, accidentally became an agile coach, kind of helping people figure things out without doing it for them. But really, I had the gap of what coaching was. And I ended up looking at more formal coaching certifications, and the CTC, which is the major one with Scrum Alliance, was something I had in my sights. And to get to CTC, the path goes straight through ICF. They demand a certain level of professional coaching. And having undergone that journey, I can safely say it was transformative. It was very much enlightening to show the gaps in my own capability, but also how I could stay true to myself, bring my flavor to it, which I'll hit upon in this. I've added a few things to the slides to try and bring in some flavor of agility to it as well, because I think that's a strong undercurrent in the group, and it's good to kind of frame where the formal coaching competencies are with respect to agile as a practice. So let me see where my screen is here, and let me start my slideshow, and then I'll be able to find it. Here it is. Awesome. I'm the kind of presenter that has no issue being interrupted. So if there's a point you want me to focus on or have a question, use some of the Zoom facilities to put your hand up or do something to catch my attention. Failing that, unmute and just ask me to stop, right? So meetups are nice and casual like this. So absolutely let me know. And similarly, if I'm talking too fast and you're struggling to catch up with me or keep up with me, say it as well. Okay, so I'll go with the pace that makes sense to make sure everyone can follow along. So let me have my monitors and screens set up and I am good to go. All right, so I kind of hit on this before the screen share is there, but just to recap it, I'm on the second part of the CTC application. In fact, I'm just getting my references in order to submit it. So fingers crossed in Q4, this will be up for review, and I'd love to come back in the new year and hopefully tell you how successful and how fun the journey was, or tell you all the mistakes I made, because both of them are equally interesting. I'd done the ICF-ACC accreditation that followed from an 18-month ACTP course. So there's two paths into getting formal ICF accreditation, and ACTP is the one that I'd highly recommend. It gives the most rigor. It's also the most expensive. So just to throw that out there as a disclaimer, but you get a really solid grounding, and the amount of hours you get makes the ICF accreditation to get your 100 hours very trivial because of how they have pro bono hours rated. Also, for my sins, I wrote a thesis on agile coaching competencies for my master's in Lean. So I'm a sucker for further education, and I went back to college after 10 years to do a master's in Lean, because Lean is very tightly coupled with Scrum, with Agile, and it actually, Agile and Scrum really come from Lean from a historical perspective. But I focused on agile coaching competencies because they really, really interested me, because far too many people turn up to a team and say they're a coach. I was one of those people, and I knew I didn't have the competencies, but it was only hindsight told me I didn't have those competencies. So I like framing what coaching is, right? Everyone here has a good idea, but it's nice to hear perspectives from other people. And in this case, it's not even my words. It's a friend of mine who's a peer coach, and he put it very simply. Coaching is a series of focused and deliberate conversations between you and me, in which we'll uncover what's really important to you and work out what areas of your life need some focus in order to align it with those values. And that to me is a wonderful capture of the essence of what coaching is, and the competencies almost fall out of that as a statement. And what I love about this is that it's discoverable by people who are unaware of what coaching is. It's helping set them straight and create that contrast maybe between what consultancy is or what therapy is, which is often areas that get mixed up. And I love this as a graphic, right? And this is really what a good coach will try and do. And this is just credit the internet, right? Not my own ingenuity. And it's really facilitating means to identify the problem and try and allow the client to come up with solutions to solve part of the problem or the bigger problem, depending on the scale of it. Because a valid coaching session might be you coming to me deciding whether to buy a new toaster, or a valid coaching session is coming to me whether you want to change career, or whether you want to lose weight, or whether you want to try something different in your life. So it means within a 20-minute session, we could solve it. We could get that picture, or we could just unravel one part of that picture. And that's why coaching is and can be a long-term relationship, which is where the competencies tend to describe and tend to talk towards. But I wanted to throw this in here to ground where formal coaching fits in with the almost accepted ACI, Agile Coaching Competency Framework. This is also known as the X-Wing, if people have heard of the colloquial name. And this comes from Lisa Adkins, who has that fantastic book on Agile coaching. It's literally the main book you should read to figure it out. But you look at the breadth of what's here, it's about being a practitioner first and foremost, and having capabilities around teaching, mentoring, facilitating, and coaching. It appears as almost a small little sliver of that X-Wing. And then, of course, there's masteries underneath the hood as well. And this actually is what led me into my own thesis, because looking at that and looking at the journey that I've done, to get to master coach, MCC is 10,000 hours. It's that whole theory of 10,000 hours of deliberate practice will get you to a level of mastery. And I don't even feel competent enough or confident enough to take coaching off of that graphic to say I'm the best coach I could be, because it's a journey. So how in the world can an agile coach be an excellent teacher, an excellent mentor, an excellent facilitator? Now, I think I'm a good teacher. I feel I'm a good mentor. I'm not a great facilitator. I can facilitate a meeting, but I've seen fantastic facilitators that will drive energy through a team and get people moving. And the reason I'm talking about this is that coaching in an agile context is one tiny sliver. And this is actually just a snapshot of what my thesis came up with of alternative competencies. And I won't bore you with the details, but it's trying to change that perspective of being all singing, all dancing, teaching, mentoring, facilitating, to focus on almost coaching-like competencies that are intermingled through everything. So influence within a team, being a continuous learner, a lifelong learner. Obviously, the practitioner and the coaching are there, but coaches in an agile context, we miss the organization view. We focus on the team, but to change the team, you have to change the organization around you as well. And being an advocate for the client, for the team, for the process, for the mentality, the mindset, and the industry. So it's a really, really interesting area. I'd encourage everyone, if the only thing you take from the talk today is to challenge yourself on what your competencies are as an agile coach. And this is a journey I'm going to continue on and try and publish around as well as time goes on. And the reason I bring this in around agile coaching, this is what the formal ICF world view anything that's not professional coaching. They call it your blended coaching. So in an overlapping Venn diagram, you have your pure coaching, which is your curiosity, your empathy, your active listening, your presence. But you can't forget who you are when you sit down in front of that person, be it a camera or in person, and you bring with you all your experiences. So for me, it's process improvement. I come from a software background, come from a research background. I'm in people management. I played sport all my life. I have agile, I have lean, I have leadership. And most people aren't looking for a pure coach. They'll gravitate towards a life coach, or a fitness coach, or a business coach, or a leadership coach, or an agile coach. And that means they're looking for that overlap in here, that little orange kind of overlap, where you take your blend. And the challenge that most coaches have that fit into that life coach, agile coach kind of bucket, we're far too on the blended side. And we don't have enough awareness of the pure coaching skills and competencies, which is what's leading me into the main part of my talk. So why are competencies important? So from the English definition, it comes from competence, and it's effectively a set of demonstrable characteristics and skills that enable and improve the efficiency and performance of a job. But what that means in much easier language to understand, it means the person that I'm going to engage with has an understanding and an expectation of what my capabilities and roles are. And I have an understanding and capabilities of what my roles are and what the next level of my roles are. And if you take that into your job and you have someone that's a software engineer, the next level is a senior software engineer, the next level is a principal engineer, each one of those brings a higher level of competency that's expected, so that it gets to a point where people working in this area know exactly what they're going to get from you. And coaching is difficult because not a lot of people understand what coaching is. But if you take something like an accountant or a lawyer, you ask the average person on the street, 9 out of 10 will more or less capture what a lawyer or an accountant or a more traditional role that has a lot of history is. So this is why we should focus on our competencies, because it helps us understand where we are, where our gap is to our next level, but more importantly, it lets our clients understand what they can expect when they engage with me or with Harris or Anastasia, because we have different competencies, we have different skills, we have different backgrounds, and we'll have a different flavor and a different blend. And that's what you need to set yourself apart from, by understanding your competency and projecting that into your clients. So here's the formal ICF competencies, right? And we're going to go through each of those segments, so I'm not going to call them out one by one. This is from the July 2020 revision. I believe there's another revision happening quite soon. But in general, if you're going for accreditation, you get like a 1-year overlap or so on with the competencies, right? So it's not as if they're going to go away, and they're typically calibrations rather than a total U-turn on them. But when do we use competencies, right? I thought this was an interesting flow chart. This is something that a friend of mine, Chris, put together to try and help people understand what coaching is. And the first point is when someone is interested and they have what we often call a discovery session, so that they can understand what coaching is, figure out what the client wants to get from coaching, and effectively an open Q&A. And there you're actually leaning into the competencies of transparency, of what the role is, the integrity of the profession, and you're starting the active listening process. And I'll walk us through them in a few minutes. But the main part the competencies are used for from a calibration is this little rectangle at the end, the actual coaching session, where the client is committed to coming to you to solve a problem, where we'll decide on a topic and an objective. We'll try and identify what needs focus or attention. We'll look at the steps to take to move us forward, and then see, has that helped us achieve one goal or part of the goal? Later on in the coaching demo, we might only get through 2 of these steps, because a deep coaching session could take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. It depends on how complex the topic is, but this is the general flow. And because we're bound by the competencies, that's why we're not time boxing it. It should take as long as it needs. So let's walk our way through the competencies. So they're in sections, and this is a foundational competency. And as anything is with a foundation, they just have to be there. If they're not, you're probably in the wrong profession, right? So this should resonate with everyone instantly, because you're taking the time at 8 p.m. Adam's time to turn up and listen to someone talk about coaching. And this looks towards initially demonstrating ethical practice. And this is all about having personal integrity and honesty when we're interacting with our clients primarily, but it also covers sponsors and relevant stakeholders, because some of you will be coaching in an organization. And organization coaching is slightly different to seeking your own clients in a one-on-one, because a lot of those clients might not necessarily have signed up to be coached. You've just appeared because someone else has hired you. So this brings a level of ethical practice that you need to help them understand what your role is. You need to be sensitive to the client's identity, their environment, their experience, their values, and their beliefs. And values and beliefs are immovable. It is not our job to convince a person that they've picked the wrong religion, or there's something wrong with their culture, or there's something wrong with their country. There's enough of that in the world as there is. That's not what a coaching relationship is about. So we respect where people are coming from, and our job is not to question why they have a certain belief. It's to accept their view and challenge only for understanding. And that way, you're keeping very clear bounds. Whether you agree with that as a person, that can be a topic for another day, because coaches can suffer from that contrast and clash of ideals. But foundationally, we can't bring that into a session. We can't allow that bias us in our interactions. And ultimately, we use respectful language that's appropriate for the clients. So we try not to swear. Very difficult as an Irish person, I can tell you that. But we always try to use language that's respectful, that's appropriate to the setting. And what can often happen is we mirror our client's language. We use their words. It's a very powerful coaching technique, but you just have to be careful that that's appropriate to mirror back. And you can check, you can ask, right? And there's the thing with being a good and an effective coach is that clear communication. You ask permission. So do I have permission to do X or do Y? And clients respect that because it's very ethical. But ultimately, we're bound by the ICF Code of Ethics, and we uphold their core values. So ICF have an ethical agreement that you have to agree to, that you have to sign to. It's part of your membership. And a lot of that is about not bringing the company, the organization, the profession into disrepute. And a big part of this ethical practice is knowing when to say no to someone. Knowing when you are not the right coach for them because they're not looking for a coach. This is where that initial discovery session is important, because if they're looking for a consultant or a psychotherapist or other support professions, it's not for you to give that advice. You can direct them to someone more appropriate, or Dr. Google. And that can be difficult if you're trying to earn money and you're trying to get clients. And that's where one of the challenges is from an ethical perspective, to say no. That's our ethical practice. The second foundational one is very obvious to me: embodying a coaching mindset. And a coaching mindset is based foundationally on being open and curious, wanting to learn more, wanting to know more. And that translates itself wonderfully into the capability to continuously improve as a coach, not to stop the journey. And even though I've completed my ICF studies this year, but late last year, I'm taking another coaching certificate next year. Don't know what it is. I've narrowed it down to systemic coaching and something around behavioral psychology. The reason why: you need more tools in your toolbox. That improves me as a coach. It's a different perspective. It's a different style. I'll get a different feedback loop out of it. And what that is, it's being aware of the culture, the ongoing practices, and what's happening in the world. And being clued into that as a coach will in turn help your mindset that you project into your clients. And a big part of it as well is reflective practices. So I'll do the demo session later. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to ask the wrong question. I might miss a cue. I might miss some body language. I can pick up on a lot of that. I'll try and adjust it mid-session. A lot of people won't notice, but afterwards I'm reflecting. And it's why, as a coach, I get coached by other people. I'm a client for other coaches. And the reason why, I can bring a topic to another coach about something that happened to me in a coaching session. Maybe I'm struggling with unconscious bias. Maybe I'm struggling with staying present. Maybe I'm struggling with a topic that I had to coach that was personal to me. And having that fine attunement on your own gaps is a huge, huge part of the coaching mindset. The second major block is co-creating the relationship. And this is really at two levels. The first is a coaching agreement, which is actually like a contract of sorts that outlines exactly what the client should expect from you, what you should expect from the client. It might talk about monetary terms, it might talk about duration, contracting in that sense for it. But ultimately what that's for, it's to help codify what the expectations of you as a client or a client and you as a coach actually is. And it's very important to do that. Even though there's no legal contract behind it, it's an agreement, but it's helping the client to accept that these are your terms, shall we say, for being a coach. And within that, you include things like confidentiality clauses. So we're bound by ethics. What happens in the client-coach conversation shouldn't leak out to friends, the internet, whatever. However, there's always that disclaimer in there if there's a threat to someone's life, that trumps any ethical agreement, and that's in the ICF Code of Conduct, right? So things like that being in the coaching agreement are clear and they're important. But really, the agreement here is within the session. That's the most important part of the actual coaching flow. That initial 10 minutes where you're navigating with someone's mindset, where they're trying to open up about a problem they have. Maybe they can't verbalize it. Maybe they're struggling for the right words. Maybe they think about the problem, but when you start asking your questions, you actually figure out the problem is over here. And what that agreement is for, it's about setting the goals and the boundary for the session. And the reason that's important, it allows you draw the client back to it when it's a complex topic, or they're wondering, or they find another topic halfway through. And this is where you can draw someone back and say to them, I see we're talking about X, our original goal was Y. Which goal should we focus on? You're giving them that choice. And that's where it's a co-creation. It's not you following the topic you want to follow. This is client-driven fundamentally. And by having those agreements, you're helping the client get value out of the session, because otherwise it's a 60-minute rant or a 60-minute vent. That might be useful, but that's not what coaching is for. So you can have this agreement as a means to pull people back to the conversation by asking the right question, by having the right presence and reminding them that 20 minutes ago, this is what we agreed to talk about, but also giving them the option of saying, hey, which of the 5 topics do you actually want to focus on for the remainder of our time? But part of the bigger agreement is in a long-term relationship. So someone might have a goal that will take them months to unravel, that might have multiple topics within it. And this can help us set a long-term North Star or lighthouse for them to follow, where we're constantly able to tie back the progress, which can happen in very small, isolated, narrow silos, to the overall goal. So this could be someone on a weight loss journey. They want to lose 50 kilos and they're despondent because they only lost 1 kilo, but they're 1 kilo closer to their 50 kilo goal. Or they've made a progressive step on a plan to maybe join a gym or clear out all the junk food or whatever. It means you have an anchor to visibly show people the direction they're going. You can bound them to that anchor to show that they're on the right path and that they're making progress. And this is where the co-creation is so, so important. And as mentioned in the last bullet point, it's all about explaining what coaching is and isn't. And that's why it's so important to have a 10, 15-minute conversation before you agree to take someone on to coach, to help ensure it's a right fit for everyone. The next part about co-creating the relationship is cultivating trust and safety. You've probably seen and heard a lot of psychological safety in the last couple of years. Fantastic book by Amy Edmondson on the Fearless Organization. Highly recommend reading it. It talks about that need to establish an environment where your client and you are comfortable admitting you made a mistake. That we can create an environment that's judgment-free, that we allow our clients learn from failures. In other words, they turn up to the second session and haven't followed through on any of the promises they made. Our job is not to give out to them or be annoyed with them or show emotion. It's to help understand what went wrong with the plan, what changed, where was the commitment, and what was holding them back from achieving it. And they're open, inquisitive questions. And it's ultimately about allowing them to fail, succeed, and openly share ideas, because that's how we get the better decision making. And a big part of your role is to create a supportive environment, to empathize with people, to share your own experiences, especially if you feel that will help shift the client's perspective. Most clients feel that they're the only person in the world that has gone through this particular challenge. And that can be very helpful to support them through that, to give them encouragement, to thank them for sharing, to acknowledge their progress, to acknowledge that they've made a failure on their side, but they've learned from it. And this is all about the support mindset that we need. The big part about this, though, is no judgment. In no way, shape, or form can judgment come in. That includes non-verbal. So a client comes in and says, oh yeah, that goal last week, I never bothered doing it. So if I'm sitting there like this and the camera is on, that's judgment, right? That's judgment there and then. So it's about having almost a poker face, and you'll hear me in the coaching session later. I almost have a coaching voice, which is very tone neutral, so that it doesn't accidentally give the wrong impression of me being excited or happy or sad or disappointed, or the range of emotions that you can convey with your voice. And that creates that respectful environment. And ultimately, it's all about demonstrating that we're open and transparent, because if we do that, vulnerability can occur, and vulnerability can build trust with the client and allow them get past a potential mental roadblock that they have on a topic. Maintaining presence is probably one of the most difficult coaching competencies in an online world. There's too many distractions. I have 2 lights up here to keep me illuminated. They're a distraction. There could be chat messages going off. There could be dogs snoring. There could be children going past. But presence is not just having a quiet environment to focus on the client. It's being fully conscious and there with them in the moment. And this manifests itself in this observant, empathetic, and responsive to the client's spoken and unspoken words. You're often listening for words that they're not saying as much as words they are. And this helps demonstrate a curiosity in the coaching process, that we're able to show the client and pick up on something very small and ask them what's going on about it. And a great example of that is listen to the words people say. When you're asking people what the plan is, so to go to the famous weight loss one, so what can you do to lose weight could be a topic that comes up, and the client might say, well, I could go to the gym, and I could go and maybe do online shopping to stop the temptation, and I could, and I could, and I could. They keep saying the same word. And presence will pick up on that. Whereas a more unaware coach will think this is great. They have a plan. They're starting to do X and Y and Z. But the present coach will pick up on the language. They'll observe the hesitancy in the word choices they're using. And they'll ask the client what's coming up for them. When they hear that, they'll mirror it back to them. I hear you keep saying would and could. What's stopping you from committing? And this really is a challenge when the topic can be emotive for you. And staying present means we have to manage our emotions, manage our tone, manage our body language, and ultimately mirror that into the clients. Because if they see you're fidgeting and distracted, they're going to do the same. Humans mirror body language very easily. And even how you slow down your words, slow down your talking. I'll take a 4-second pause before talking, and you'll see that later. And if you have a very fast speaking client, which a lot of native English speakers are, It slows them down. It brings the tempo down. And that's all about presence, that you're noticing that this person is running away with their thoughts and their words. And this really talks about creating space. And that space is important because the space might be, we don't know what to do next. We don't know what the question is. It's buying us time to ask the right question. It's buying the client time to leave their thoughts catch up with their mouth and see what their next step might be. And that allows pauses and reflection. And that's really what you get with presence. You get reflection. Communicating effectively is the third major quadrant in the competencies. And active listening is that really, really interesting skill that you can practice in any way, shape, and form in your life, from in your household to a cafe to your professional life. And here, you're trying to focus on what the client is and is not saying. They go back to that comment on the word choices that they're using, or the gaps, or maybe they're just stopping short of saying what they want to say. And how do you know that? You're looking at body language, you're looking at maybe the hands being crossed like this, or you're looking at fidgeting. And that all ties in to interpreting exactly the conversation and narrative that's there. And what you're considering within this is not just the client's words, it's their context, their identity, their environment, their experiences, their values and their beliefs to help enhance the understanding of what the client is communicating to you. So just because you'll have 10 clients in a row will say the same statement 10 times, you're not getting the same interpretation off of each one of those because of all of those variables that are going around. And a big part of active listening is that capability of reflecting or summarizing it back. And you're doing this for a couple of reasons: to ensure clarity and understanding. So what I'm hearing is, and you feed it back to the client. And it's a great way to bring focus on what you think is the important part of it. But it's also a real clarity bringing exercise when you genuinely don't know what the issue is, because they're going in multiple directions, which is the norm, which can be very scary as a coach, irrespective of your experience. When they're talking about weight loss, they're talking about a relationship at the same time, they're talking about hating their life, they talk about not enjoying work, and about 4 other topics. And you're sitting there trying to process all of these, trying to create a mental mind map of how these things stitch together. And you reflect it back and say, I'm hearing multiple topics here. Which is the most important? And it's a real honest thing for a coach to say, and not just pick up on the last thing you heard or what you thought was the biggest picture out of that. And this is all about inquiring when there's more to what the client is communicating. So it's perfectly fair to say you feel like they're holding back. Is there something else they want to share? Do you want to probe that further? And there's different techniques and different question and style and powerful questions to help pull that from a client. And you'll go on your gut instinct. The longer you do this, you'll get a sense when someone is holding something back. But a big part of listening actively is about looking at the emotions, the energy shifts. And when you see an energy shift in your first session as a coach, my God, how you feel is amazing. When you've asked that right question that has physically shifted someone, that you can see their tone has gone up, there's a brightness about them. You'll often see people even shift in their seat before they answer. It's a physical shift. And that can only happen if you're actively listening and then pair it with the right question or the right observation. And it makes people think about what you're really asking them. And it shows how well attuned you are to their needs, to the words they're saying, and catching where the gap is, where that gap is between them. And this is all about what we call evoking awareness. And this is where we can challenge the client in a way to evoke awareness or insight. And we have a toolbox to do that. You'll hear of the powerful questions, the real ones that will really drill into someone. And like one of my favorite powerful questions is to ask people about beliefs or values. So what do you value? Or what does feeling mean to you? So they'll say, I feel sad. And you'll say, well, what does sad mean to you? Because what sad means to me and sad means to you could be a total different experience. They're powerful questions. But silence can be uncomfortable, but it can allow something saturated. I'm going to take 4 seconds now and feel how long this 4 seconds of silence is. It's long, isn't it? That's a long time for a client to sit in silence because humans have a tendency to want to fill that silence. We can also talk in metaphors or visual imagery. Like I mentioned the anchor. The anchor is a really powerful one because everyone knows what an anchor is. It grounds people, it holds something down. So if you find a value, you can talk to a person about an anchor. So how can we use your past happiness as an anchor to move you forward? And that's brilliant because that means they're not going to blow away in the wind of emotions they have. They can visualize it, they can feel it, and you can shift people with that and evoke that awareness. But what we try to do to evoke that awareness is ask questions that move them beyond their current thinking. They have a mental block about something right now. So you can ask the simple question of, what would 6 months' time look like? How do you want to feel in 6 months' time? And they're the kind of things that can shift people beyond the current thinking, because the current thinking is clouded. It's that jumble of spaghetti that we had in the image earlier. The future is clear. Blue skies and green fields, and you get them to explain where they want to get to. And the challenge then is that gap. That's what we progress as a coach, to help them on that gap. And you want to invite the client to share more about their current experiences and ultimately notice what's working in the client's progress and remind them of it. This goes back to that praise, that empathy, that connection, that feedback loop that you want to create. And you're really trying to invite the client themselves to generate ideas for how they can move forward. This is pure coaching competencies. Whereas agile coaching, you tell them what to do. You're in consultancy mode. So they'll come to you and say, I'm struggling with sprint planning. And instead of asking what it is you're struggling about, why is it a problem now? We'll go, oh, have you drawn a stakeholder map? Or after telling them one solution to maybe what's not their problem. And that's why we want the client to generate the ideas, for them to evoke the awareness, not for us to precede that awareness. Now, we can do that to an extent with the right questions, but we don't want to make people feel that we cornered them into an idea. That's not what coaching is. The last box is about cultivating learning and growth. And ultimately, the goal of a coach-client relationship is to facilitate client growth, to transform their learning and insights within a session into tangible action. And we go through the sequence. We mightn't get there this evening. We don't know the topic. It might take too long. But ultimately, we'll decide on a goal for the session. We'll explore the topic for a little while. We'll get to an action plan. We'll talk about accountability. What supports do you have? What barriers do you see in front of you? How can you not hit this goal? And that raises awareness, because you're ultimately trying to get people to shift the perspective to improve themselves. But you're doing that in a manner that's 360 degrees. You're talking about supports, accountabilities. What obvious barriers do you have for this? And you want to integrate those learnings into their worldview and behavior. So the last thing you want is to walk out of the session having nailed the goals, and in 2 weeks' time, they come back and they haven't progressed the action plan. And you go through 2 weeks later, you nail the session, we come back and there's a problem 2 weeks later. Now we can focus on why the commitment hasn't followed through. Tell me about the support mechanisms, the accountability, again, in a non-judgmental way. But ultimately, you can take two views of the world. I'm getting paid and this person's going to keep turning up to me every 2 weeks and just not going to achieve anything. Or you can care about your client's progress and see this integrate into a change for them. That's what coaching is about. And through this client growth, we celebrate the progress and success. We can do that in session and between sessions. So in session, it's great to remark to someone how far they've come in the session. From a point where they had no insight or direction to a sense of clarity. I almost like to summarize the journey in 2 sentences at the end of it to say, hey, we came with this goal. We had a really clear breakthrough around X, and that transitioned into an action plan over here. And even just you feeding that back, summarizing an hour's worth of a conversation in 2 sentences, they can see how far they've come. And this ultimately is how we partner with the client to successfully close the session or close the engagement. Because coaching shouldn't be a job for life. You should be there for when the client needs you and not turning up to just have a conversation. Lots of social ways we can do that. And now, why should we know all these? So if you're to take these blocks that we have about creating the awareness, your powerful tools, getting yourself into the position to close out the session, that's the flow of the coaching agreement. So take the foundational step out of this, because you need to be that person to be a coach. And if you go through the slides I done in order, that's the flow of a coaching conversation. We get the agreement, we communicate for clarity, we evoke awareness, and ultimately we move to action. So if you're to practice making yourself more competent within this coaching area, that's the flow to take. Take the slides in order. Take the ICF document from top to bottom. Assume you have section A, the fundamentals, and hit those in order. If you're struggling with your coaching capability, go back to the basics, go back to block B and start your way up. That ultimately creates the strong foundation for you as a coach. Because if you unlock those key blocks, you become a better person. And every so often, I need to go back to those blocks myself. I'm not at 10,000 hours. I'm nowhere near it. I'm very humble about that. And 2 of my problems can be jumping into maybe a false avenue and not probing the area a little bit deeper. So you'll find a topic has multiple layers, so many different surfaces, and you're trying to pick the right one in a time constraint. And you might pick the wrong one. So maybe taking a little bit longer to navigate it. The other one is, as a native English speaker, I can use longer sentences than are needed to try and explain it. And part of that is my mind is going as my mouth is going. So I'm trying to think in the right question and I just start talking. And that's where silence is so key for me, to slow me down and ask the right question. 12 months later, I still get hit with those. And I go back to my foundations. I go back to communicating for clarity. And if I get that right, the rest of my skill set takes over. And again, to go back to one of the initial slides, why? Why should we do this? Why should we invest in competencies? It helps our clients understand what they'll expect from us. And that's key. That demystifies coaching instantly. And when you move into your agile world or your health and fitness world or your life coach world, it'll help you, your blend, to become more balanced. You won't be on a 90% blend towards agility. Should be somewhere in the middle. You're avoiding consulting, you're avoiding mentoring, and you're avoiding teaching. And if you look at the framework that we just looked at, with coaching as almost a central tenet to that, how can you be a better teacher and stay balanced as a coach? Can you leave them self-direct, self-learn? Can you switch into asking questions rather than showing? What about mentoring? What about technical and business mastery? Can you take some of those skills of active listening and be a better mentor? So instead of telling, ask for clarity about what's wrong, really listen, really observe, then give your advice. In terms of your masteries, understanding that the masteries are very, very deep and that you can't master all of them is probably the biggest takeaway I've had from looking at the coaching competencies. That understanding that there's foundational blocks and they don't map the masteries. And that's sad, but it's a big takeaway, right? That you can't be perfect at everything in that side of it. And the last few, facilitating. Instead of jumping to action, jumping to help people, being that white knight, step back, observe, leave silence take over. Next time you facilitate a session for any team, count to 4 and don't say a word and see what happens. Somebody will step up, somebody will take over, someone will drive the conversation. And finally, being a better agile lean practitioner. So use your coaching ability to not just throw things at people, to listen, to observe, to try and see what their challenge in the here and now is and calibrate them. Instead of going with a playbook to say, you're adopting Scrum, okay, we're doing prioritization, we need to understand what story points are, now we know what we do, we'll do a backlog, we'll do sprint planning, when in reality, the team are struggling to communicate and you might just want to start with a daily 10-minute check-in. But if you're a coach at a pure coaching competency, you're listening for what the problem is right now, not for what you think they need to do immediately. That'll lead to a slower engagement, but what will stick longer? And that's ultimately what the goal of a coach is, transforming the worldview and creating actions that stick for people. Folks, that's it. That's the presentation. My email is there. I will provide a copy of the slides. We can upload it to the Meetup site or email or whatever way we want. I'm on Twitter as well and LinkedIn. Delighted to connect with people. And I'll happily take questions.
Leigh, thank you so much initially for this presentation. It was really enlightening. It was refreshing. It was very nice. Thank you. At least for me, it's like, going against through is what you said also, what I realized that sometimes that even happens if we talk only about Scrum, for example. We're trying to put the solutions into play and we're trying to do like new fancy retrospectives or whatever, and we rarely reflect on the agile values or on the Scrum values and principles. So this is something that I think we have to, not only that we could do, that we have to. And that's the same pretty much with what you present to us. And I'm really glad because it's been a long time since I haven't done so. And it gave me another point of view, very enlightening. Okay, we have some hands raised. Angelina, you want to go for a question?
Yes. I have a question. I'm not sure how much time we have.
Go on, no worries.
Okay, so it's question. I'm trying to find an answer at the moment. It's related to the slide where you showed pure coaching VC, the professional one. I'm trying to understand probably why the word coach is being chosen for the professional coaching, because I also have seen the great misconception that's created at the moment, and everyone that a lot of people actually associate coach with consultant or mentor, and they think that if they're only consultant, that makes them coach, but they are not actually doing any kind of coaching. So trying to understand if this is being discussed in ICF actually, or is trying to be further clarified, and would that title will continue be using, because I think from the title itself a lot of misconception and misunderstanding is generated until you try to search and learn through mentors or through internet.
It is a super observation. There's no simple answer to it, right? And that's something ICF is challenged with because of the dilution of the word. Mm. And I think one of the challenges is the certification mill that has emerged around, in particular, agile certifications. I can take a 2-day IC Agile certified coach course, which I've done, right? And I'm not putting that course down. I loved it. I can call myself a coach. I can turn up and just have been a Scrum Master in a previous role and call myself a coach. I can take a 1-day webinar and call myself a coach. I don't need to take any of these things and call myself a coach. And what this is coming down to is fundamentally teams and hiring managers or leaders don't understand what a coach is. They understand the conception of what a coach is. And coach as a term, it's very industry neutral. So take sports. Sports coaches are very clear what they do. They help get the best out of people. They mightn't have been the best at that sport themselves, but they're good people motivators, they're good organizers, they're good facilitators. And I think personally speaking, that's what's maybe blinded some people's perspective of what the coach is, because they don't understand it and they see so many different implementations of it. But then they meet a real ICF coach and it's not what they expect, and it's often not what they want. So I have a couple of external clients outside of Red Hat that I work with, and I would say at least 80% of them don't want pure coaching. They want the blend. They want who I am, the leadership, the agile, the management background. But that doesn't stop me using the coaching skills, the active listening, the powerful questions, the energy shift pickup, all of that good stuff. But ultimately, the session will look and feel a little bit closer to mentoring at times. And that's difficult for me to reconcile because that's not what I wanted to do when I was taking people on, but it's what the client wants. And I will ask in sessions like that deliberately, can I step out of coach mode and into mentor mode? I will use those words because they will often ask me, what would you do? And as a coach, you're not there to tell them what to do. And if this was a pure ICF coaching engagement, you could tell people this isn't what coaching is, and you can explain and educate what coaching is. But when someone is hiring you for your blend and your team wants that facilitation, it puts you in a difficult position unless you have a mastery of what the competencies are to know that you can still stay true to the competencies and offer the blend. But you're right, Angelina, it's difficult. And the more you read about it, when I was doing my thesis, the academic footprint of coaching is minimal, absolutely minimal. There's nothing there that is telling me the history of coaching like it is for software engineering, like it is for lean, like it is for agile. They're well grounded empirically from a research perspective, but nobody has done extensive studies on coaching. And that's one of ICF's underlying goals from an R&D perspective.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just trying to understand if the future holds more specialized roles, actually, just to clear that misconception. Because as you said, I might be good at coaching and mentoring, but I might not be good a facilitator or consultant. Yeah.
So I'll give you an insight here, and I don't claim this. There's a guy called Michael Della Mazza on LinkedIn. He's an agile coach and he's ICF certified as well. But Michael had this view of the world as being a pebble coach or a diamond coach. And what he broke it down as an analogy. Say, Angelina, you're going to a restaurant. And on the menu, you see there's Chinese food. There's Italian food, there's Greek food, there's burgers, there's pizzas, there's Korean food. Are you going to eat there? There's like 6 different cuisines. Or if you go to a restaurant and you see it's an Italian restaurant, they only have Italian food. And the analogy there is if you fill a jar with pebbles and each of those pebbles is a different capability, you can't master any of them. So you don't want to be a pebble coach. So it would be perfectly fine. And I've done this where I'm asked to facilitate something and say, well, being honest, this person is a better facilitator than me. I'm happy to try, but you won't get the same value as if you got a dedicated facilitator. And that comes with maturity. But not everyone has that option. Your team might be too small. You have to be the facilitator. But at least making people aware that you're not the best at this role, that this is your diamond. So my diamond is mentoring and coaching. Not facilitating, not teaching. I can do both, I could earn a living from both if I really had to, but it's not what I'm passionate about, and it's not where my skills are. So have a read. If you Google it, I'll type it into the chat there in case people can catch it. Diamond Coach v Pebble Coach, and it'll come up. I'll see, can I find the link?
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think you answered my question, is continue raising awareness instead of trying to fix the misconception, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lucas?
Yeah. Yeah, I have also something similar to say. I'm towards Scrum and Agile certification, so I have plenty of them. I miss this coaching stance, to be honest. Yeah, but in all the organizations that I work for or at, and the clients, they are all capacity driven, quick results, efficiency. So I'm struggling with this, and I cannot use the values of Scrum or some of the Agile Manifesto ones. Yeah, for me, I would go towards this ICF competency framework, but I don't know. I don't know if I will find the audience to apply. Let's say this. And I am honest.
And that's very true. And it goes to Angelina's point about companies and industries and teams not understanding foundationally what a coach is. But to almost flip that, the journey you get and the ability to improve your execution as a Scrum Master, an Agile coach, or whatever title you want to go by is immense. I have a PhD and a master's, and by far the most valuable qualification I've received is the ICF qualification for what it done for me from a transformational perspective, a capability and mindset perspective. It's changed my interactions in my day job. I can't change the job, but I can change my job if I wanted to. So if this became a real cultural clash, you can absolutely leave your company and go out on your own. Coaching is a growing profession, and without me advertising, I've picked up several clients outside of Red Hat. So there is a market there for pure coaches, but the difficulty is being particularly in a software team, they don't understand that pure performance style coach, which more leans to the ICF coaching, and they want the quick fixes. Go and update Jira for me, go and facilitate this Scrum ceremony, go and do X, go and do Y. You all get it, right? And there's the contrast, but you elevate yourself above that and give yourself the skills that will improve you. It might reflect into the team, it might not. That's just the unfortunate thing in the industry.
Are you covered, Lucas?
A lot. Thanks. I have to reflect.
That's nice.
Great, and it's been so resourceful. Thank you so much, Leigh. And I'm sure everyone is kind of reflecting and processing now with the fantastic information you shared with us. What about showing it in action? Do we have any volunteers that would want to?
Do you want to stop the recording now? So
yeah, for sure.
Cut that end of it.